Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we are looking at a new generic search spell that is coming out in like less than a week to the TCG. This card is called Piri, Reis Map. It adds any 0 attack monster from your deck to your hand. Now there's some restrictions there. It's not just generically that crazy, but it is still pretty crazy that a lot of different archetypes, a lot of different decks are going to have searchability that they did not have access to before because, spoiler alert, Konami's made a lot of pretty good starter cards, normal summons in archetypes with 0 attacks. So let's get into it. I'm going to start off with a couple of generic cards, and by a couple, I mean like 2. They're really, because of the restrictions, there's not a ton of generic stuff you're going to be able to search with this. But without further ado, let's get into it. We'll start out by reading it. It's Piri, Reis Map. It's a normal spell, and it reads as follows. At the start of your main phase 1, add 1 monster with 0 attack from your deck to your hand, but have your life points. After adding it to your hand, until the end of the next turn after this card was activated, you cannot activate the added monster's effects or the effects of cards with its name until you normal summon that monster or a card with its name. Okay, so where are the 2 restrictions? The first restriction is that this has to be activated at the beginning of your main phase 1. That takes a little bit of versatility away from how you're able to sequence your plays. It does force you to have to activate this at a very specific time, and so sometimes you would like to sequence this a little differently, but it is what it is. So that's kind of a restriction. The second one is if this card resolves, you do take half your life points. That's another hit on this card for sure. There are certain decks that really don't want to pay life points because they're not ending the duel super quickly. So in a grind, having your life points cut in half for free is kind of can't come up. And the last thing is the biggest one. This is honestly the biggest one. So it says you cannot activate the effects of the monster that you added until you normal summon it. That takes away a lot of things as well, because if you had looked at the list of 0 attack point monsters, you could have thrown hand traps on the list. Ash Blossom, Ghost Bell, Effect Veiler, Droll and Lockbird, Token Collector, any of those, any hand traps, any of the Ghost Girls with 0 attack. The problem is this card says until the end of the next turn, you cannot activate their effects. If it said until the end of this turn, you're locked out, then it would have been fine because you just add it to hand and then hold it because you may have already had a play, so you just add the backup. Here, this is kind of not quite the same because you're just going to have to suck it up and move on, and you can't really just grab a hand trap. You have to grab specifically something you want to be normal summoning that turn. So it is what it is, but there are still a lot of cards that work with this. It sounds like the restrictions are crazy, but trust me, there are a good amount of archetypes that really are going to suck it up. I don't care if this has to be activated at the beginning of main phase 1. I don't care that I pay half my life points, and I don't care if it negates my monster's effect until it's normal summon, because I'm going to normal summon it anyway. So let's get into it. Okay, so we're going to start off with the generic stuff here. First off, there's a couple cards here. The first thing is Time Lords. Time Lords actually work really well here. The big things here is because they normal summon themselves without a tribute. That's how they work, which is really cool. So they do make their effects live and they're normal summoned. So if they were special summoned, their effects wouldn't be activatable. Secondly, a couple of them are actually pretty damn good cards going second. And I kind of like that because when you look at the search targets here, mainly it's just starter cards for archetypes. Now, starter cards can help bait hand traps, then you can try and extend after that, and you need to have the first piece to be able to get into other stuff anyway. But sometimes it's nice to even have access just to a going second option here, right? And so just having something generic like the Time Lords here could be pretty good, especially in the right matchup, or paired with something like a Droplet or a Dark Ruler. You negate their board first, then you just summon a Time Lord so it can't be negated. Attack, end of battle phase, bounce everything back to the hand or shuffle it depending on which one you use. So there's like 2 or 3 Time Lords that are actually pretty damn good. This is one of them, Matayan. After the battle phase, he returns as many monsters on the field back to the hand other than this card, which is really good. Next up is Jester Confit. The reason I have Jester Confit in here is because I believe his effect to summon is not a activated effect. It's actually just a summon condition. I think. If it's not, let me know. I sometimes I get iffy on the card text with this ruling. If not, there may be other cards with that same clause, so maybe it's worth taking a look just for generic extenders. But we have decks right now that just want to power through until they get to Verte, and then Verte gets them to into their Phoenix Enforcer or their Dragoon. So if the difference between that is needing to search an extender like Jester Confit or some other card that has that kind of condition where it's not an activated effect, because I don't think it'll be negated by the spell if it is, then you can still potentially get there, and that can be the difference, like through an interruption or two. So just something to note there as well. So those are really the generic options. Then we just get to a ton of archetypes. I'm going to zoom through these because if I spend too much time on all of them, there's too many. There's almost 30. So let's go. Starting off, Dark Beckoning Beast. This is a one-card Curious, so it's just kind of a resource engine. We saw this being played with Eldritch for a little bit around their release, but still a cool engine, something to keep in mind there. Disciple of Nephthys. This is the best starter in Nephthys. It's a cool card, actually. Generically pops a card in your hand, kind of like the True Draco field spell. Pretty cool. Good starter for them. Infinite Track Harvester. I don't think this one matters as much because this is not the kind of deck that really struggles with consistency. They already have a search spell. They also play Metal Cruncher and the Machina search spell, so they really have no problem getting starters, but I figured it was worth noting. It's one of the more potent cards on the list here. Next up is Yang Zings, and the cool thing about Yang Zings is it's not just Chi-Wen. There's literally like 4 different zero attack monsters in Yang Zings that you could search, so depending on levels or depending on whether you want a tuner or not or what attribute you're looking for, that actually could be kind of nice just to be able to get anyone you want. I actually like that. Next up we have Mechlord Nucleus Infinity Core. I don't think this deck does much, but this is one of the few good cards in that little mini archetype, so yeah. Searchable. Prankins Fancies, kind of the same thing as Harvester because they have the field spell that searches, and because they already, any of one of their names is a 1-card combo. I don't think it really matters that much, but I figured it's worth mentioning because why not? It searches a Prankins monster. Prankins are good. I don't know what to tell you. Galaxy Wizard. This card searches any Galaxy card from deck to hand. It does need to be normal summon first, so that kind of just already works. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I feel like if Planet Pathfinder was zero attack, then like this card would be kind of cool because that means Piri Reis map essentially searches any field spell in the game at the cost of your normal summon. But that could be worth in the right deck. Next up is Sage with Eyes of Blue. We know this card's pretty good. It searches Veiler, I think, so that's cool. But then also just has good synergy with the Blue Eyes archetype. We'll see. They got new support in Battle of Chaos, so we'll see how they are there. But still a decent one to add to the list there. Sunset Genius Lochi. This is one of the better ones as well. This is one of those decks that just needs to see one copy of its vanilla monster, and that's 1-card combo. Unfortunately, I don't know if there are any good searches off of this card for extenders potentially, and sometimes you do have a lot of access to Lochi. You could open hands with like triple Lochi, and if your opponent has one hand trap, you kind of just lose to it. So there can be awkward situations like that, but you just got to do the best with what you got. Next up is Beautiful Princess. This one's really cool as well. Mainly a shark card, but I guess this is one of those cards that should just be on that list of like, if Konami ever comes out with a good fish archetype, boom, this card should be looked at. And the fact that it's now a little bit more searchable may just add like a new starter to a lot of fish decks or any fish deck that comes out in the future. It's pretty cool. FA Auto Navigator, again, deck doesn't do a ton, but this is a really good card. Like a lot of archetypes wish they had a card like this that just read their archetype name at the top. For sure. Format Skipper. Format Skipper is a really interesting one. This card comes up in like a couple of multiple archetypes. Certain Cyberse archetypes, stuff like Crusadia. I've theorized it potentially like Trap Tricks even, or Magical Musketeers, because it can just help you make like generic or link ones that are archetype specific by copying a name, which is really cool. And then it searches you another free body, which is pretty cool, honestly. So I think it's an interesting card for sure. There. Nightmare Corrupt Durability. This is another one. Oh, I didn't even mention like Cyberse archetypes, who's like code talkers, that kind of thing makes Format Skipper like really interesting. Then you have Nightmare Corrupt Durability, same thing, like weird archetypes that like can abuse this card because this lock is actually no joke. There are certain decks in the game like Sword Soul that like sometimes just like can't even with this card. You give it to them and they just like scoop, or they have to like tribute over it, and at that point they just wasted their normal and a card in hand. and you're like okay with that. Cosmo Tin Can, another really cool one. Like Cosmos are like one of those interesting archetypes. They would need a lot of support to be able to compete in 2020. There's the way they work is so outdated, so inconsistent, but making your best starter a little more searchable definitely helps with the consistency. So I think they'll take that all day. This might be one of the archetypes where like you definitely play this card. Mutants, another really interesting one. They have like these 1-card starters that get you to their boss monsters, and this one and the new one coming in Battle of Chaos are both 0 attack, so that becomes really interesting to make the deck a little more consistent, maybe even a little more fluid to potentially open both. Because I guess if you already have the other one in hand, because the other one, the new one, summons itself from hand if you control a mutant, I think. So like you could search this one, normal summon this one, summon the next one, and there you go. 2 cards gets you 2 of the boss monsters. I think that's pretty decent. I think mutants are interesting. Next up is Rika Petal. This one, I mean, it's, yeah, basic archetype. Your best starter is a 0 attack point monster. Even though we have a couple of ways to already get to it, I guess I prefer Piri Reis map over Lone Fire Blossom, because if you get ashed on the spell, at least you still have your normal summons. So if you already opened a Petal or something different, you're able to like play through it better than just getting ashed on the Lone Fire. So pretty cool there. I think that could be one of the options in like a pure Rika strategy. Interesting. Next up, you have Super Quantal Fairy Alpha, and there's another really important one to note, because if you're budget and you don't want to play the Diviner of the Herald package, very expensive, in your Super Quant deck, maybe this card is just that extra 3 copies of your best normal summon. And this card's 1-card combo, so like we'll take it. Next up is Weather Painter Snow. This one's super important. I think this is one of the archetypes that is like has to play this card. You don't even have a choice if you want any kind of consistency. Like Snow is like legit the only 1-card play in the entire deck, and not that every deck needs to have a 1-card play, but other than that, you like have to open the spell with another Weather Painter to like do something, period, get any kind of setup going. And this deck doesn't even have any interruptions aside from the Link 3 that takes you 3 whole turn cycles, yours and your opponent's, to make. Horrible. I wish this deck was so much better. I wish I could get a busted Link 1 like Magical Muskets did, because that was so messed up. I feel like those archetypes were both like similarly powered, and then they gave Musketeers like a busted Link 1, and they gave Weather Painters like an okay trap. Sucks to suck, man. I would love if Weather Painters got a really nice, like really crazy Link 1. I think that's what they need. And is this the last card? Yeah. Okay, so the last card we have today is Zodiac Rapier. I think before I might not have even included this, because I'm like, who cares? Because most Zodiac players aren't even activating Rapier's effect when they summon it. But I think for the sole fact that we lost Barrage, and we lost 2 copies of Tenki, so now like Zodiac players are just like maxing out on all their Zodiac numbers, and like if they want to play even more without playing some of the less good names, you know what I mean? If you don't want to have to force feed Cataroost into your desk or too many Bunny Blasts, you could just play this card. At least it searches Rapier there, so that'd be interesting. If Dryden comes back, then it makes Rapier even more interesting, because it actually is the 1-card combo with Dryden. But until then, it's still just a nice card, even for the pure like going second zoo deck, to be able to get access to a zoo a little easier without having to just play like 50 monsters. So yeah, those are all of our options here. A lot of cool decks, a lot of like just table, not even table 500. Some of these are just like tier 3, tier 4 decks that will appreciate, that could in specific builds appreciate the consistency boost that they will experience with this card. I think it's a cool card. I like that it's not like making any meta decks like crazy. It's just making like a good chunk of like decks that are considered not competitive like a little more consistent. I like that. I like it when we get generic cards that don't help the top of the game but help everything else kind of rise up a little bit there. So can't wait to see what people try to do with this card. Let me know in the comment section down below if there's any other specific cards that you think, or archetypes that can abuse this card to good ability, because this is just what I found scrolling through the giant list of 0 attack point monsters in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts in the comments, so throw that down there and subscribe to the channel as well if you want to see more discussions like this one down the line. But I'm gonna get the hell out of here. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Peace.